Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm super excited to have you here. With us, we have Justin Reock. He is the field CTO and Chief Evangelist for Gradle.
That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk with you today.
And for those of you who aren't watching on YouTube, this is obviously Connor Bronston. I'm your Dev Interrupted co-host, and we're here live at DevOps Enterprise Summit for another incredible episode. We've had a chance to have like really interesting people on the show. And Justin's someone we met here at DevOps Enterprise Summit and said, "Hey, like let's get you in here. Let's do a recording. Let's have a bit of a conversation." But before we dive into why we want you on the show, let's hear about like how'd you get to be where you are and CTO at Gradle.
Yeah, sure. So my story began when I was a teenager and played with languages like Perl and things like that when they were out. So that took me down a path of working for companies and evangelizing the use of open source in the enterprise, right?
Mm,
Doing it in a way that was, safe and secure and responsible, but then also being able to reap all the productivity benefits that come from being able to get your hands on high quality software, quickly and let that augment your work. So that really got me thinking a lot about productivity, right? Productivity
yeah,
in general, right? I mean, open source, it's like, yeah, the license is free, whatever. But the old sort of free as in free speech versus free beer, still kind of
yeah,
holds up, right? It's boring to me that there's not a license cost associated. What's really interesting is the freedom and flexibility that you have to use this software kind of in any way that you want. And so I worked at a company called Open Logic for a while. I became their field CTO. My job was to, the commercial team as well as our customers and advocates about the importance of things like open source governance policies and its effect on productivity, which took me to Gradle about a year and a half ago. Gradle's been working on a new practice called developer productivity engineering, which we're kind of seeing as like the next shift in consciousness for the industry, thinking more about developer experience and how we can improve that. So when I saw what they were doing, I was like, this is what I want to work on. It's getting to the
yeah.
point where you go to like an open source show and you're like, hey, you should have an open source policy because open source is great. And people are like, yeah, we
Yeah,
know. Thanks.
it's been a couple
We're,
years
we're, we're
now.
doing
Yeah,
that. Yeah. So you were
yeah.
right. So it was interesting to see like, this new practice and something I felt like I could really be passionate about and kind of get behind. And it's been great. I think we hit the market at like just the right time when
Amazing.
people are starting to think about this stuff.
It's
So
great when you have that
so
feeling, isn't it?
yeah.
And to your point, like you've seen this open source revolution happening, and now you're at I think you'd call it maybe the next stage of like okay, like developer productivity engineering. Let's start with defining that for our audience. What does that mean to you?
So, developer productivity engineering is a practice that involves acceleration technologies, analytics, and observation to really engineer a better experience for our developers. So the idea though is that we use technology to remove barriers to throughput for developers,
Yeah.
right? So it follows in the footsteps of practices like DevOps and
Hmm.
Agile, and but you can take it all the way back to what I like to refer to as like the ancient business wisdom of the 70s and
Yeah.
80s. So like business process reengineering and change management,
I mean, value stream management is one example of something I
value
practice,
stream
and that
management.
didn't come from software.
No,
No, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, so we're here at the IT Revolution show, obviously.
yeah,
They have the Phoenix Project, which is a great homage to The Goal, which is one of my favorite books,
yeah.
Eli Goldratt and where the theory of constraints really came from. And what does that teach us? Why are these practices successful? Because they simultaneously decrease costs while at the same time increasing throughput. And the theory of constraints tells us you can't really just do one of those and expect a real transformation in your business. So anyway, the idea is that, developers spend way too much time waiting on feedback cycles to complete, waiting on test sets to run, or dealing with inconsistency in the builds or unreliable build, flaky tests and failures that could have been avoided. So we try to remove all of these kind of barriers to throughput and keep them in a state of creative flow as much as possible,
Yes. As
right?
much as possible, because there's so
Yeah.
much context switching built in,
Oh
whether
god,
it's a
yeah.
PR process or something else, like jumping into team meetings, it's really easy to lose that.
Yeah.
And something that we've even noticed is a lot of times, like even once you get your code done, you need to have someone to review it. Maybe it's gonna be a couple of days for the review. Maybe you've already worked on something else. And you're like, oh shoot, like what did I build here?
Right.
How can we reduce that kind of friction point? And there's a lot of these friction points to go after. So like developer productivity engineering, love that idea. It's very clear to me, not just on the show, but here at DevOps Enterprise Summit and elsewhere, like there's a growing recognition this is an issue.
Oh, it's happening all across the board. I mean, when we say that developer productivity engineering is the next big thing in software, like we actually mean that quite literally. It's
Mhm.
like if you look at the bottlenecks that have been solved in a lot of ways by DevOps, right? If you
Yeah.
look at, being able to release in an automated fashion, being able to easily perform canary releases and things like that. That's all important. It's great, and it has removed barriers to throughput. It does let us, to use the theory of constraints terminology, convert our code inventory into throughput at a lower cost, but it hasn't solved everything, and, especially not in the area of developer experience. Like, it blows my mind that you still have, developers that are waiting. I mean, in the most extreme case that we've seen, 20-hour feedback cycles.
Mhm.
So it's like you just cram in everything that you can, and then because 'cause you're gonna wait a day, to be
Yeah.
able to get this kind of feedback. And that has a whole bunch of cascading problems because now I'm introducing a really large change set. So if something breaks, I've got a much bigger scope of things that I have to look for to try to investigate and fix the problem. We were talking before the show about, Netflix is a company that really does this
Yeah. I
right.
love this.
They've got a great focused developer productivity
And
team.
I got to shout out Catherine Kohler. She's
Yeah.
the director of developer productivity. Came on the show a couple months back. Amazing episode. If you want a like little corollary after this, check that one out. Great follow up for
Yeah,
this.
no, good plug. And they think a lot about productivity and that we were working with a guy, Danny Thomas, who's one of their
I know
productivity
Danny. Yeah.
engineers. Yeah. And he said something in an interview that was it's burned into my brain. I
Okay.
use it in a lot of keynotes now when I'm talking. He said it is staggering the amount of toil and friction and frustration that engineers are willing to put up with. You know?
Can I borrow this quote? Am I starting to-
Absolutely,
Okay. All
please do,
right.
because I
Good.
think it's essential. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so spot on to kind of why we haven't solved these challenges because nobody's complaining, right? I mean, it's just accepted that this is almost like an occupational hazard of being a
There's almost a sense
developer.
of pride about it, right? Of like, oh,
Sometimes.
like I dealt with this thing. Like you need to too. This is a part of the getting there in the industry. I talked to someone yesterday about how we have this idea where it's like, oh, we can't have you go through like an apprenticeship style process. You have to like, work your way up and like push through things. You can't just like learn the right practice at the start. You got to fight for it.
It's like, really?
Yeah.
Because I mean, because what is software development, right? It's about creative flow.
Yeah.
It's not destructive flow, right? It's creative flow.
Software developers are
Yeah,
creators. Absolutely.
absolutely. Well, and it's so the brain has been mapped while developers are writing code. And it's this
Mm,
amazing soup of right brain and left brain activity that's happening all at once. Like on the one hand, you're creatively problem solving, you're visualizing the problem in your head, you're
right.
thinking creatively about the code. Then the other side of it is you make this hypothesis with a build tool chain. You're doing something very scientific. You're saying, okay, if I write this code,
Here's how I solve the
here's
problem.
how I
I
solve the
think.
problem.
Yeah.
And does the
Yeah.
compiler, you enter into a dialogue with the tool chain, did what I did this solve the problem?
I
Right.
love that description of a dialogue with the tool chain because it's so true. Like not only are we having a dialogue with our team members and our collaborators, but there is this because of how we've evolved our tool sets. You have to like also think about like how is this impacting the compiler to your point and all these other pieces of like what's the checks? Is this meeting the standards we need?
Yeah. Yeah. So what happens if you're in a conversation with somebody and it takes them 45 minutes to respond, right? That's a boring and frustrating conversation. It's certainly not going to keep you in a state of creative flow, which is where if we really had to, pick an outcome from developer productivity engineering, beyond a vanity metric, things like that, we really want to know how much time are developers just allowed to spend coding. And you talk about
Yeah.
this context switching too. There's been a lot of interesting research over the last decade. I mean, probably heard some of the research that says we can't really multitask as humans. Like we
No. It takes
convince
like
ourselves we
15 minutes to
can.
kind of get
Yeah,
back into it.
about a
Yeah.
15-minute tax that you pay on that context switch. But over the last couple of years, we've determined that not only can we not do this, it's actually unhealthy. It is bad for our executive functioning to try to force ourselves to
Yeah.
multitask. So there's like numerous reasons to try to reduce the context switch. I mean, obviously the objective and economic reasons for being able to keep developers more focused and productive, but it literally impacts health. And developers are more productive when they're happy. I mean,
I think
that's a no
everyone
brainer.
is.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think I wouldn't know because I only know software, but I'm sure it extends well beyond
Yeah. Yeah.
just this craft. But no, I mean, that's really our philosophy is that if you remove the toil and the frustration, then developers are naturally going to be more productive. But we haven't done it in some, like, authoritarian way where, like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you're gonna lose your job," instead it's like, "No, let's make your job more enjoyable. Let's let you spend more time doing what you love to do."
And it's not just productivity either. There's like
Yeah.
we mentioned second order impacts, but for engineering leaders listening, if you can improve the experience of your developers, you retain more of them.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
recruitment is a huge challenge for
Yes.
engineering leaders. So is retention. Like if someone doesn't have fun in their job, they can go work somewhere else and they probably have high demand skills. They can go do that. So if we can improve developer experience, not only is it going to improve productivity, but it's also going to improve retention, probably going to improve recruitment if you can like actually put out in the world. There's a lot of stuff this does to provide value to not only the engineer, but the team.
It's true. Another one of our big customers is LinkedIn,
Oh, yeah,
and they have a dedicated productivity team as well. And they're very open about using this as a recruiting measure to say, hey,
totally.
we invest in developer experience. Like we have dedicated people who just make sure that your experience is good, your platform onboarding is good, your day-to-day work is enjoyable and not full of frustration. And that's 100% the right attitude because we are living in a world that, IDC predicted this back in October of 2020, and it's come true, is accelerated a little bit because of COVID, but that the global GDP is roughly 65% digitally transformed at this point, and that
Yes.
is it's
And that's only
amazing.
increasing
Yeah,
too.
of course, yeah, I mean, just more code begets more code,
Yeah.
but I think the last time I saw a statistic, and probably Gartner, somebody like that, the estimate is that we're about 3 million developers short right now. So, the war for talent is only gonna get more and more combative, and to be able to say, like, to paint a really good story about your investments in DevX and in developer productivity, it's very compelling. I mean, you've got, let's face it, you've got really, like, well-known developers they're sitting on a ton of equity, they're driving Lambos, they're not in this for
Yeah.
the money, right? They're in this because, they wanna work in an environment that makes an impact and where they're enjoying what they're doing, right? There's just no way that you can say that spending 2 days diagnosing a flaky test is, like, enjoyable. I mean, no offense if you're super into that.
I'm sure someone out there is really
Maybe,
about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't mean to
Yeah.
alienate you, but for mere mortals, that's
Yeah.
not the way that we wanna spend our time.
Totally.
So, yeah.
I'm curious if there's gonna be a second order impact of, hey, we improve the developer experience. That probably also means it's more accessible to people who are coming into the industry. And maybe that actually enables us to close that gap, not only for the individual company, but if we say the industry is less toilsome, maybe that's gonna allow for more recruitment and training of junior developed devs who will stick around longer.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, especially, like, I'm a big fan of the whole Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours
Yeah.
for expertise type of thing, but is it 10,000 hours waiting on a build to complete, or is it 10,000
Oh.
hours writing code?
Yeah.
And so obviously if you're able to spend more time on that part of your learning and your experience, that only makes sense that you'd be able to onboard faster. You won't run screaming from the industry because you're like, "Oh, this is not what I signed up for. This
Yeah.
sucks." So, no, I think that I mean, there's all these impacts, and the time is right for it now. I mean, Gartner released a CEO report a couple of months ago, the 2022 CEO report, and it was like, I don't remember the exact statistic, but it's like a 40% increase in terms of CEOs that are now that they actually have developer experience on their radar, which
Good.
is it's very good,
Yeah.
but also, like, very acute, right? I mean, just a couple of years ago, it was way low on the list of
Yeah.
CEO concerns, and now it's one of the top concerns. So again, going back to the next big thing, DevOps is across the chasm. It's commoditized. There's a thousand different ways to deploy Kubernetes. There's a
Yeah.
thousand different ways to put in CI/CD. But being able to now focus on new bottlenecks that have always been here, ironically, but we just haven't really considered them.
We're a young
It's very
industry
exciting.
still, and
Yeah,
we're
it's true.
evolving very quickly, but I mean, it's also challenging for organizations to keep up with the pace of change for technology. I mean,
Yeah.
we really can't in a lot of ways. So it's crucial we have these conversations and say, okay, like, what do we need to do to not just have technological solutions, but organizational solutions?
Mm.
Because you need to pair both together. If you just do one or the other, you're not going to succeed in the long run.
And that's one of the things that actually differentiates DPE from DevOps a little bit is is the human factor, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the platonic ideal of a DevOps team is supposed to be not a team at all, right?
Yeah.
100% automation, no humans in the loop, right? But with developer productivity, you have to have humans cascading this practice, caring about, the metrics that they see on the dashboard and correlating that to developer experience.
Yeah.
Without that empathy, then you don't get the focus. You don't get anything actionable that really changes the culture of the business. So that is a differentiator is that you need those people to be thinking about these problems. But then, that ends up and ideally these people have written code, right? I mean,
Right.
it's a very special you come across these developers who like truly care more about the performance of their team and what the whole team is going through in terms of their developer experience versus their own experience writing code. And they're everywhere. They're in every organization. I mean, that's the thing is like a lot of folks have already been doing DPE. They just haven't been calling it that,
Yeah.
or maybe it's a part-time couple hours a week that some development lead spends on productivity. But what we have to see now is a shift in focus to making this a center of excellence. The companies that are really doing this right, the Facebooks, the LinkedIn's, the Netflix's, they have dedicated teams of hundreds of
Right.
productivity engineers, that's thousands of developers. And that's the only way I think to kind of keep enough of a focus in the industry to allow this to be a transformative change as opposed to just a minor tweak.
How are you thinking about like the metrics and visibility aspect of DPE?
Probably the most important metric is one that no one keeps track of. And I know this because I give our keynote and everything like this to all kinds of different audiences. And I always ask a question that's provocative, but it shouldn't be,
Okay.
And that
We love
question
that kind of
is,
question.
yeah,
So good.
it's a good question. And it's, are you tracking local build times? Are you
Mm.
tracking the amount of time that developers are literally sitting on their laptop waiting for something to build? And the answer is like a resounding silence always. People are like, "Oh, no, I didn't think to do that." But it's actually the most important metric for
Hmm.
quantifying developer experience. What is developer experience but a sequence of feedback cycles? Again, that dialogue with the tool chain. And how can you possibly hope to improve that if you're not measuring it? So that's one of the most important metrics is, how long are the build times actually taking?
Right.
Now, the acceleration component of DPE, we recommend we have 3 distinct technologies that we recommend, but it's not the only way to approach this. We have a caching solution that caches individual phases of a build so that they don't have to be repeated in subsequent builds if things haven't changed. We have a way to distribute unit tests to let them run in parallel and elastically auto-scaling environments, but we tie that directly to the build tool. So it's not part of CI. It's happening locally for the developer. Build local.
Build
That's what
local.
we mean by
Yeah.
that. And then we have predicted test selection, which is newest addition to our suite. It was actually developed by Google and Facebook. Facebook published a paper about it in 2019. Uses a machine learning model, take a look at a history of changes that have been made to the code base, and try to predict which tests are actually going to provide interesting feedback as opposed to just
Right.
succeeding. And it's kind of a waste of time if you think about that. So we need to look to it the avoidance savings as well, right? Once you have this acceleration techniques in place and you know how long local builds are taking, we need to figure out how much time are we saving using the acceleration technologies, and is this consistent? Do we see a performance regression? Or the builds 2 minutes on Tuesday and all of a sudden they're 5 minutes on Friday? And in real
Hmm.
life, what happens is nothing. The developers are like, "Oh, that sucks. The build's taking longer. Oh well, can't do anything about that."
Yeah.
And then, or if it does go reported, then it doesn't get prioritized. Because again, it's really hard to diagnose if you're not keeping track of the metrics. Like if you wake up one day and your builds are taking 10 minutes and you're like, "Oh, I remember a couple of months ago, this was a lot faster," but you have no way to pinpoint, where
If
this
you're not
change might have
tracking
occurred.
it.
Yeah, and so many things can impact it. Endpoint security upgrades, antivirus, new versions of an annotation processor, up dependencies. I mean, more
Yeah.
lines of code, all these things can impact build performance. But if we're not looking at those trends, then we can't pinpoint, which ones were added that might have been deleterious to the developer experience. And then also there's the analytics side of failures and flaky tests. So
Right.
flaky tests, I've heard them called the infinite pit of sorrow.
It's
Like
a great name for them,
Spotify
actually.
calls them
Yeah.
that. They have a great blog about flaky tests where they talk about how they have the traceability in their app to be able to link almost all jankiness that they have in their app back to a flaky test somewhere.
Hmm.
Because what's the psychology? It's like, oh, the test failed. Run it again. Oh, it failed again.
Huh.
Run it again.
That's strange.
Oh, it
Yeah.
succeeded. Great, done.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you totally just introduced a bug. So we measure that as well, and we recommend a couple of different ways to detect flaky tests. And then you make that data actionable. You put it on a dashboard. You sort the dashboard by percentage flakiness. How often has this particular test been flaky? And then our own engineers, our Gradle build tool engineers, as well as our Gradle enterprise engineers, just schedule flaky test days where they just sort by flakiness. They start at the top and they
Hmm.
just eliminate, eliminate, eliminate. So this is like, everything's infinitely more than zero type of idea where we're completely proactively avoiding frustration for developers by fixing these things using data. And then failure analytics are really important too. When builds fail across an organization, you want to aggregate that data so that you understand, hey, 200 developers were impacted by this failure over the last week, versus the more anecdotal side that's usually the approach now, where it's just one angry developer's like, "Oh, I've got the worst problem in the world. You need to fix it right now." And you had a dashboard, you could say, "Oh, actually, you're the only one impacted by this. No other developers have felt
Right.
it."
Or you could say, oh, there's 10 others. They just haven't talked to us yet.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So those are the key metrics for us. But I would say, if you kind of come away from this interview with one actionable thing that you can put in place today, find a way to track and visualize local build times. Some people do this in CI, and that's okay. I mean, that's better than nothing. But a lot of developers are still doing a lot of incremental work right at their laptop. And that experience is just usually not traced or visualized at all. And that's the one that matters the most.
Yeah.
And most organizations, when they go through this transition, when they start tracking local build times, they go from thinking that everything was great because nobody was complaining to, oh my God, this is awful.
Well, if we don't track it, that's not a problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right.
Come on. Like, I don't want to see
It's
that.
somebody else's problem. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that having that visibility, I think, is the most important thing. But it all comes down to what frustrations are developers experiencing, and how much idle time do they have in
Right.
between their feedback cycle.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about idle time as far as that being something where if we can align folks, like developers want to solve problems. They want to spend their time solving problems, and idle time is a huge killer of that.
Yeah.
It's a killer of flow state, as you mentioned earlier. And you can attack it a lot of different ways. So I appreciate this perspective on it. It's nice to have. I'm curious, and just broader developer experience. So
Sure.
anything else that you're seeing trend wise within the industry as we have these conversations where you're like, oh, here's something else that should be talked about or addressed, or that you're hearing someone else talk about?
Yeah, and especially with respect to productivity, because by no means did the solutions that I just lay out encompass all of what we can
Oh,
do in
like we
terms of
said, it's been
productivity
an
engineering.
evolving thing for the industry. Like
Oh, yeah.
realistically, this industry is so nascent still compared to, I don't know, like car
Oh,
manufacturing
yeah.
or I don't know, creating clothes or something like that. Like there's so much here and we're just getting started.
And it all exists in this weird virtual space
Yes.
too, right?
Yeah,
On
yeah.
top of that. So,
Increasingly so.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so other trends, I'm really happy to see the focus on open source supply chain security. That supply chain security focus, though, it's really important, but I think most people think of it from the eye of, oh, we don't want to get hacked, which is very true.
Yeah,
But
valid.
think about it in terms of productivity. There is no bigger
Mhm.
impediment to productivity than a publicly disclosed vulnerability, because what happens
Ugh.
at that point? Everything
Fire drill.
stops.
Yeah.
All hands on deck, right? I mean, when Log4Shell
That's
happened,
not a good developer experience either.
no, it's not. Nobody wants to worry about that. Yeah. So there's no bigger productivity killer in my mind than finding out that your code is vulnerable,
Mm.
because then that becomes prioritized over everything else. And to your point, it's not fun to go through and trace through dependency graphs. Again, if you like
Someone
this
probably
thing,
likes it.
if you,
Yeah.
I keep alienating. I'm like,
You're
I'd say 80% of people would agree that it is not fun to trace through
It's okay.
dependency
People
graphs.
who get angry about our episodes are actually great. So like, feel free because they comment a lot. So yeah, come on, bring
That's
the-
good.
bring
Any
the-
press is
yeah.
good press, right? Yeah. So it's a huge productivity killer. The ability to bake that into the supply chain, and seeing things like the SigStore project and the Persia project that are coming out now, kind of these like next generation approaches to reproducible builds and making sure that code is
Amazing.
genuine. It's great. It's really, really good to see, and one of the more creative uses of blockchain too, in SigStore, I think.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens with it. I think there's a lot of potential evolving that can happen within
Oh, yeah.
utilizing blockchain to kind of apply to security and supply chains. I mean, that's obviously one of the key use cases. What can we do there? So
Yeah. Yeah, that's blockchain is this, and obviously it gets like thrown around and used.
it's a buzzword for a lot of people, but
It
there
is.
are real impacts of using distributed ledger technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We solved a real hard to solve problem. I mean, being able to create scarcity in a digital space, that was like pie in the sky. I mean, like if
Yeah.
I, take this water bottle and I hand it to you, a very clear exchange. Just,
Yeah.
It's happened. I am no longer in possession of the water bottle. Now you have it, because there's only one like this in the whole galaxy, and
Been impacted differently.
and
Yeah.
right. But in the digital world, reproduction
copy
is
that,
easy.
yeah,
You can
that's-
copy it a million times, and who knows if it's genuine, right? So yeah, so being able to actually create scarcity is, I mean, it's amazing. We're going to enter into this world, I think, where we're coming into it now. Everybody's just going to kind of have a blockchain, and there's definitely different use cases for it. As we kind of like get digested into this metaverse thing
Oh, man.
that it wants.
All right. I gotta say, I'm more of a believer in AR than I
Oh,
am.
totally, 100%. VR's for games. I mean, it's
Yes. Games and like maybe work. Like if you have a
Yeah.
distributed team, maybe it's great to have like a VR meeting space. We can meet in this dome. I don't know. That could be
like
cool.
I've tried a couple of those. Like Spatial is one that's out on.
I haven't tried that
Quest.
ever. It's interesting.
It's
though.
kind of interesting.
Okay.
Like there's a little bit of magic sometimes where, so one of the things that happens is they can translate, like 2D objects into 3D objects in the environment. So
Yeah.
one upshot of that is like, if you're not in a VR headset and you're on Spatial, you also have like a web browser client that you can use instead. And if you like drag a PDF document into the little web space, it pops up in VR.
Oh, okay.
And then it's like, so
Yeah.
it's like, then you have this document, you're like looking through it. That's
Yeah.
a little bit of magic right there. That's
Yeah.
very cool. But no, in terms of real practical, I mean, it's going to be, I agree with you 100%. AR.
I kind of wish Google Glasses had worked. It'd be kind of fun.
I know, right? And well, this new one just got released. So I've got the in between stuff. I've got the stories, the Ray-Ban stories.
Oh,
And I
Oh,
will say those are very cool. Like
okay.
it's, I got it. I have 2 grandkids, which actually surprises
I
folks.
would have been very surprised to
My
hear
my
that.
wife's
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
older than I am, and we've got we're a blended family, and we've got 3 kids between the 2 of us, and so now we've got 2 grandkids. I was like, you know what? We miss so much just reaching for the phone to try to take the picture. It's like, and then the moment has passed, right? So
Yeah.
I gotta say the stories are actually pretty cool, but they're
Mm,
not the real
just
like
a
AR
V1.
immersive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
V1, but so we're getting there. But I think this merger of digital twins and AR is going to be really
Yeah.
important. You may have seen the whole thing that Nvidia did with Toyota.
I actually haven't.
Oh, wow. So they built a full like virtual digital twin of a Toyota factory. Yeah, Nvidia did this, and then you put your glasses on, you walk around in an empty room, but you're actually interacting with digital replicas of everything that's in the that's
Wow.
and it's all modeled so you can go like tweak some. I don't know anything about car
All right.
manufacturing,
Well,
but
I
you
know what I'm
go
doing after this. I'm checking this out.
yeah, it's
So,
super cool.
yeah.
Go and like tweak a setting and be like, okay, what impact does this actually have on production before you do it for real,
Amazing.
right?
Well, Justin, thank you so much for
Oh
this
yeah, yeah, my
far-ranging
pleasure. Yeah,
conversation. This
this
has
was a
been really
blast.
interesting.
Yeah,
We'll have to have you back at some point, but thanks for joining us on Dev
oh,
Interrupted.
my
This is a ton of
pleasure.
fun doing this in the dome and kind of getting
Yeah,
to
this
know
is a
you a
great
bit. So
setup. Yeah, a lot of fun. No, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and definitely look forward to a future conversation.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna do my final direct to camera thing here for
Yep.
anyone watching on YouTube and for those listening at home. Look, y'all, we really appreciate when you subscribe on YouTube. We really appreciate when you give us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It matters so much. Like that's how we get discovered by amazing folks like Justin, and so they can show up on the show. It's how I sing for my supper here and get a little feedback there. And I kid, but it really does matter, and it matters to the team, our audio engineer Jackson. It matters to our producer Adam, and like this is it's a lot of fun doing this. We want more of you to like express how you feel, even if it's not as good. Like, you can give us a 3-star review. Tell us what to improve on. We'll help improve it. We'll get you up to 5 stars. We want that. Take that 30 seconds, help us out. And that's my plug here. But thanks so much for coming on, Justin.
My pleasure.
Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll talk again soon.
Take care.